Welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast. My name is Anthony Oliver, and today we're going to talk about how the UK turns all the infrastructure aspiration announced in last week's budget into the kind of life, economy and climate change in reality that's implied, or perhaps promised. Yes, infrastructure investment plays a key role in driving economic growth across the nation, across the regions of the UK. And according to Chancellor Rachel Reeves, the budget's £40 billion budget spend will add some 1.4% to the economy. Well, we can discuss that, of course, but only if these plans can be first turned into projects that actually succeed in creating the outcomes promised and demanded. So infrastructure professionals simply have to get the delivery right. The economic pressures facing the nation, the social need in terms of housing, jobs and living standards, the absolute need to prioritise global net zero targets and maintain a resilient future mean we cannot afford to get it wrong. And that means starting with an end in mind and then putting in place the steps that lead towards success. In the short term, delivering to time and to budget, and in the longer term, creating and maintaining the nation's infrastructure to set us up for a sustainable future. And of course, it's easy to say, but harder to deliver. So what can actually be done to put in place the kind of steps required to plan our infrastructure, access the financing, and then deliver to expectation? Well, my guest today is Hannah Vickers, Global Head of Advisory at construction and consulting giant Mace. And in this role, well, as I understand it, Hannah is responsible for creating the strategies, the business cases, and the practical insights that increase delivery confidence, enhance productivity, and create value for Mace's clients and investors. So I reckon that she should be well placed to help shed some light on this conundrum. Well, let's find out. Hannah, welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast.
Thank you very much, Anthony. That's quite the introduction you've given me there. Hopefully you won't disappoint.
Well, I'm sure you won't. But so let's start, Hannah, with the big picture. We have heard a huge amount this week about infrastructure investment promise from the government in the budget. In building affordable housing, in transport projects, in local authority spending, in hospital and school refurbishment, and I suppose also in green energy to drive that extra growth into the economy. I mean, you study these promises closely. What leapt out for you in terms of genuine step changes in the approach by Labour?
So I think I will caveat this by saying I think we're only getting half the story at the moment. So we've got sort of the second chapter is going to come in the spring with the conclusion of the spending review and the 10-year national infrastructure strategy. So that will be the game changer. But it is positive, what we've heard so far. I like what they're doing around the planning regime. It's not sexy, it's not exciting, but it is quite important that we get some of that confidence back in the planning regime. And it is something that actually only government can do. So whilst I know they've been sort of going large on the, amount of private sector investment and some of the, the transport projects that were reconfirmed yesterday in the budget, I think actually the most fundamental thing that they've done is to start to address the challenges on planning.
Okay. Well, there's no question, they are big numbers. It was a big budget and they're very big numbers when it comes to infrastructure. I mean, perhaps let's start chatting through some of those numbers, starting with the building sector. 3.1 billion for affordable housing, 1 billion to tackle post-Grenfell cladding, 1.4 billion to refurbish schools, plus 2.1 billion to maintain them, spending on hospitals. We'll get into the detail, I'm sure, but what might make or break this later?
So, yes, I mean, that's big numbers for you and I. Small numbers in terms of the volume of infrastructure investment that we actually need, I would say. So I pay less attention to the individual announcements. What I'm looking at is actually are they being clear and consistent in their top line? And the piece that is most interesting to me in that is actually that they are interested in economic growth. So to my mind, that's where the sector can really start to push forward the things that we really need around long-term certainty, because investment in infrastructure will drive long-term economic growth. And that's the narrative that we need to be repeating back to the government and not get distracted about individual announcements or individual projects.
But they are talking about individual projects, of course, particularly when you look at transport. You've got the Transpennine Express, it's connecting up the north. You've got the East-West Rail, connecting Oxford to Cambridge. And of course, we've got funding for HS2's link between Old Oak Common and Euston. I mean, in your view, I know you don't want to get you caution against getting too bogged down with individual projects, but but can this aspiration really be turned into reality?
So I think it can. I think there are some real challenges that they're going to need to overcome given the fiscal constraints. So, we are talking about individual projects there. Interestingly, yesterday there wasn't any mention of Lower Thames Crossing. To my mind, that should be the first programme that we get away as a privately financed transport project, or the first one in recent years. So I'm looking out for things like that, which will be, in the vanguard of making this a reality. Because if we can't get that away, you've got far less chance of then, the Euston Station redevelopment being a privately financed programme. So.
Well, of course, yeah, the Lower Thames Crossing was, of course, pushed rather back into the long grass a few weeks before the budget. So they set out their stall about what they were doing with that. But on energy, there's clearly big moves by this government, turning, as they say, the UK into a green energy superpower with investment in GB Energy, carbon capture and storage, and I think it was 11 green hydrogen plants that's been put forward. I mean, but I imagine that is an area for someone like Mace. You would be probably thinking there's quite a bit of opportunity there.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, and it's not just the plants themselves. So, we will look at the wider infrastructure as well. So the port redevelopment that's required to service some of the things that we're expecting to come out of the GB Energy programme is actually quite interesting to us. I would say that, the other link in the area where I think the government has been doing, and this is not the current government, but where we've got strong government support, which is really important to us, is carbon capture and storage, because that's not just about us delivering projects. Actually, that is essential for us to decarbonise how we deliver projects, which impacts the whole sector. So if we don't get those CCUS plants away, we won't get our sort of net zero in construction, whether you're building a house or whether you're building a skyscraper. You can't do it if we don't have that.
Yeah. Well, tell me about your new role, because you have just stepped in to become Global Head of Advisory at Mace. What do you get up to? How do you drive that change? And how do you start putting some reality into the infrastructure ambition for Mace?
So I think that, this isn't just speaking now as Mace Advisory, but I think the role for the advisors is to try to bring some of that delivery expertise up to, the earlier stages of projects and programs, so that we can make informed decisions. We can help clients think through the challenges and make the right decisions at the right time, actually having a better line of sight to what is likely to happen downstream. And in doing that, improve their delivery confidence. But
I suppose Mace, at its heart, Hannah, it's a management contractor. It's very good, very innovative, but it's a contractor nevertheless. What can you realistically bring to consultancy and advisory? How do you, as you say, redefine the boundaries of your clients' ambitions? I've quoted there from your website, by the way.
I know. I feel like you've sort of swallowed the Mace strategy. You'd get 10 out of 10 marks from Mr. Reynolds. I'll make sure he listens to this, Anthony. You'll be on his Christmas card list for sure. There's. If you think about Mace's evolution, yes, we started as a contractor. We've then, out of that, we've grown our consultancy business, which now works around, we don't deliver where we're working overseas. We are working purely as a consultant. The next evolution of it is this advisory business that I'm starting. So if you like, that's the third leg. And to be honest, this is something which is quite unique, because I can literally reach across into my construct engine and say, right, let's sit down, early stage with the client. This is their program. This is their sequencing. This is what they think they're going to do from an MMC perspective. Let's start to bring you in. It's going beyond early contractor involvement. It's actually I call it an early contractor selection, but you're sitting there going, we're not going to build this, but if we were going to build it, how would we approach it? And what advice do we need to give to the client now? Yeah.
But of course, you're acting across property, corporate real estate, infrastructure. Is that the real benefit that you see there, that ability to actually understand what it takes to build something and what it takes to work with a client to build that asset, that gives you the edge when it comes to designing it and putting in place the project to make it happen?
I think so. So we have that ability to be able to bring the downstream delivery expertise. I think what is also interesting is being able to work across the different sectors, is to take the best of what we see. And they all need quite different things. So, if I look at the biggest opportunities for us to drive change, actually we've got, where we're working with our strategic development partner, for example, because I can understand a contractor and I can understand an investor, we can sit in the middle of that and actually help the public sector negotiate amongst all of those to redesign and develop things at a citywide level that they wouldn't get that advice, in a one-stop shop from anywhere else.
Interesting, though, that you work across 4 global hubs, the UK and Europe, Americas, Middle East and Africa, Asia and the Pacific. yes, we've got a big aspirations to spend here, but really, how important is the UK when it comes to driving a business like yours?
So there are still things I'd say that are definitely exportable from the UK. And we have got, we go back in time, we exported PFI and PPPs around the world. You wouldn't believe it now from our last few governments' attitudes to that. But that is what, that did start in the UK. I think there are similar things that we will be able to take out as exports, so Project 13, some of the alliance in collaborative contracting, the construction playbook and the policies within that, all of that is quite exportable from the UK. But then when I look at, things that we can learn back, and bring back to the UK, if we go out to the Middle East, the scale of work and the pace and the fact that actually this is all new. So they're very open to change. They're very open to transformation. There's not any, we've done it here like this for 30 years and therefore this is how we will do it. So there will be some really interesting and innovative things coming out of that around, efficiency and productivity. And the same with America. We've had, in recent years, we've had Biden and the Inflation Reduction Act. There is a mass of infrastructure investment sort of happening over there, which in itself will, I'm sure, start to give us learning that we can bring back in.
Yeah. Which I suppose brings me to the way that you, in your role there at Mace, are actually trying to help your clients. And you talk about, you're thinking bigger than just the build. And I imagine that the priority is to put in place the financing, put in place the project to make sure that all stacks up properly before you actually get into the project. I mean, is that one of the challenges facing clients at the moment, that they really want to get in with a project before it's ready and actually properly formed?
I will not even start to quote at you all of the reports that which talk about actually the importance of the early stages, the importance of initiation. So, the three things that I think, if I'm talking to my clients today, what are they interested in? They're interested in delivery confidence. As early as possible, they want to be comfortable on cost, on program, on outcomes with this. And, there's a number of things that drive that. If in the private sector, you've got higher interest rates. In the public sector, you've got fiscal challenges. So wherever you look, they don't want to have a wide range of, it could be this, but it also could be that. Right, yeah. And there's a, 150% swing between the two. That is not gonna wash. So that, solutions, cost-effective solutions, early stage to help narrow that gap. They're very interested in value for money. And what I mean by that is not just cheaper. It's actually, I want it to be better. So I want it to be a higher net zero standard. I want it to deliver some social value. And so it's blending all of those different requirements, which gives them a layer of, complexity that actually quite often the funders are managing, which means that your value for money is getting more difficult, and you're having to help them balance across that, which is, it's different.
No, but I suppose at the other end of it, you're also talk a lot about having a relentless commitment to leaving a legacy for generations to come. What does that actually mean when you're talking to clients?
So I'm going to answer this now as Mace advisory, because I'm coming into this with, a sort of an SME mindset. So if you're given the opportunity to set this up, how would you do it? So I'm wanting to set this up and deliberately pick the clients that mean that we can use this to transform the industry and transform the places we work. So what I mean by that is actually we've got a lot of theory and some good policy and things like the construction playbook, but I want to pick clients that actually want to take that and fully implement it, because, if anything, my career over the last sort of 10 years has taught me is we have all the ideas, we're sort of falling short on enacting those. So my purpose, if you like, and my legacy I'd like to see out of advisory in 5 years' time would be we did some things that fundamentally changed the industry.
Well, you mentioned your career over the last 10 years. Let's talk a bit more about it. You've got an engineering background, having studied river and coastal engineering and civil engineering at University of West of England, and you used that at the start of your career when you worked at the Environment Agency in a variety of project management roles. I suppose the first question is, what drove you towards river and coastal engineering initially?
It was actually, I couldn't read very well and I couldn't write very well, which you wouldn't believe. So I'm dyslexic. So I wanted to go into something which meant that I could learn. So I went in as an apprentice, so I could learn and do my university. And I also wanted to do something which was very visual and kind of modelling rather than essay writing. So I was never going to go and do geography or history or anything like that. So yeah, it came along at a very opportune time for me to be in the first cohort of the apprentice scheme for the Environment Agency. And it was brilliant. I wouldn't, I credit a lot of where I've gone since to actually being given that opportunity.
Were you then moved from the Environment Agency to the Treasury's Infrastructure UK organisation in 2015? You were a commercial specialist and head of project initiation route map. That came about after 10 years, I think, with the Environment Agency. But how difficult was it there to switch from this sort of real practical day job to the more theoretical policy work of government and IUK?
So it was an eye-opener. I mean, my role in that was to be I was one of two civil engineers in the Treasury to give advice into the spending teams, to give advice directly to the Chancellor on these big spending decisions. So if you like, I wasn't a policy expert at that point, but obviously learned a hell of a lot being in there. And to be honest, one of my concerns going in was I know a lot about the Environment Agency in our programme, but what on earth do I know about transport? And, very quickly, it's all the same stuff. It's all the same challenges. And actually, the Environment Agency has got a modest organisation. It was quite forward thinking, but it was just never had that reputation across wider infrastructure because it was sort of small and, not sort of exciting assets that ministers could open. But actually, the foundations that I learned there were pretty forward thinking things.
Yeah. Well, it was certainly an interesting time. You were doing quite groundbreaking work. You mentioned quite a lot of those, the playbook, etc. You then launched yourself into the industry policy and political phase of your career, first as head of policy and external affairs at the Institution of Civil Engineers, and then a year later joining the Association for Consultancy in Engineering, where you spent 3 years as chief executive. Both very different roles from those of the past, perhaps. I mean, why did you do that? Why did you make that move? And what did that period of your career teach you?
So it was, the opportunity there was to come out and, if you like, work on that conversation. So both of those organisations exist between businesses and the government. And so it was that translation, having, come out of Treasury going, right, I think I've probably got something quite unique here because I've been in the inner circle. So my role, I felt, was to come out and help the industry have better conversations with the government. Our industry is ruthlessly practical, but I think sometimes to its detriment, and you need to lift that and raise it to a more strategic level and be less literal when we're having conversations in the policy areas. So I spent, that's my 4 years there was about trying to broker that and make that a little bit more productive.
Well, you then made what some might consider to be another eye-opening move, joining Mace as Chief Executive, Mark Reynolds, Chief of Staff. Why was that the moment to make your first move into the private sector?
So it was something that I was really wanting to do. I wanted to come into the private sector to get, if you like, up until that point, I'd had government client experience. I'd then had central government experience. I was thinking, right, another perspective would be to sit in the private sector and be actually, looking at delivery, but also looking back up into clienting from that perspective. So it was definitely something I had on my list that I wanted to do. I'd led the ACE for 3 years during COVID. And it sort of went through a fundamental reset there. I'd got to the point where I'd given them a new strategy, and it was either I stayed and delivered that, or that was the point to hand it over and say, look, it's survived. It's been sort of reset. Use that as a platform for my successors. So what I did get during that period was the opportunity to get to know Mark and to get to know Mace. And he had just launched the strategy. So, for me, the opportunity to go and work directly with him, he'd never had a chief of staff before. And this was a role that he created so that I could go and work alongside him in the private sector, which was too good an opportunity to pass up, really.
Yeah, no. I imagine it gave you a really good view of what the entire organisation did and what the challenges and what the opportunities were. And I imagine that it now sets you up for, another very big global opportunity and set of challenges. And we'll get into some of those a bit later on. But what do you do, Hannah, when you're not getting stuck into the UK construction sector? Has Mark, for instance, got you into long distance swimming yet?
Oh my goodness, don't we? Yes. So no, outside of work, so I have my dogs. I do quite a lot of running and exercise and no swimming. That put me off for life, to be honest, seeing what Mark had to commit to with his training regime. And I love to travel. So I love to travel with my boyfriend. So it's nice.
Yeah. Dogs, which brand?
The best kind. I have rescue dogs. So I have brother and sister, and they are working Cocker Spaniels crossed with Staffies, which means they look like giant beagles.
Right. So it sounds very scary looking. Anyway.
It's very dogist.
Let's talk about... It's very dog. Very well. There you go. Let's talk about some of the issues that are on the cards at the moment. I mean, one of the other things that I noticed from your CV is that you are a non-executive board member at the Monmouthshire Housing Association. So how did that come about, and what do you do there?
So that was something that I picked up when I was at AC. I've now finished with them. I've done my term, but that was something that was an area of the industry that I, again, didn't know too much about. So I thought a good way to go and get some experience was actually to sit on the board and learn a bit more about the housing sector. So I was the chair of their development committee, so I would oversee investment decisions. And to be honest, it left me with the utmost respect for housing associations. So the regime in Wales is, I think, I would say far better than what we have in England. And the quality of the people and their determination to do the right thing for these, social housing tenants is absolutely outstanding. So it's not seen as probably a big, sexy, exciting client, but their work and the quality of their work is incredible. Well,
let's talk a bit about housing, because it's certainly the UK's housing challenge is quite profound. I mean, the government's got a 1.5 million homes challenge this Parliament, and a big funding pledge in the budget. Is that doable for you from your experience at Mace, but also your experience working with a housing association?
So I'd say they've made a good start by recognising that it's going to have that level of delivery would have to be a blend of social and private housing. I do have some concerns, particularly where we load more and more into the private sector, or more expectations and housing targets into the private sector. At what cost? Because the private housing sector is not one of our most productive areas. So, pouring higher expectations onto that, I think, is going to, potentially load up with some challenges around skills and materials in order to be able to deliver it. They will have to fundamentally shift how they go about delivering it, if we're not going to end up with massive materials inflation, which will then impact on everything else that we're going to try and build at the same time.
But it's clear if we're going to hit this target, 1.5 million homes, 300,000 a year, we'll have to change the way we approach it. You mentioned a huge amount of work at the Treasury on and with the CLC, with the construction playbook, trying to introduce modern methods of construction. Mace has invested a huge amount in this, prefabrication. What's stopping it, and how can an organisation like Mace help?
So I think what's stopping is an interesting challenge. So it is different in different sectors. So, I think our role in infrastructure is to think far more about production strategy and the way that we construct things. So yes, there are some opportunities for offsite and modern methods of construction, as you might imagine it, but actually there are also some really practical things that we need to do. Some of the things that we did during COVID about organising our supply chains around production thinking, around actually literally what happens on site with how many people. So, things like that, and what we can do to enable that by, bringing modules to site is probably what's going to shift it for us in infrastructure. Overall, if you said, if we zoomed right out and said what's stopping it from mainstreaming across all sectors, it's about how you align the design, the delivery model and the commercials, and different organisations have had different goes at that. But I don't think anybody's cracked that as a whole in doing the right thing and being paid for it.
A huge amount of opportunity as well as challenge there for sure. Another of your roles, as we just discussed, is with the Construction Leadership Council. You lead on net zero challenge and productivity. We've got some big challenges when it comes to net zero. How do you see those challenges facing the sector right now?
So I think if I think back to when we started Construct Zero, which is the CLC's programme, in the run up to COP26, it was a low bar, because our ask from Andy Mitchell at the time was, I just need to know what we need to do to get to net zero, and if we're doing it. And, we were at that level of not even actually understanding the scale of the challenge. So since then, we have set that out with our 9 priorities. We measure it on a quarterly basis. So I can actually sit here now and say things that we are doing quite well. So the measurement of carbon has come a long way. Some of the client commitments, the work led by Matt Palmer has moved us a long way in terms of getting consistency around when clients are going to go to zero diesel sites. I think we've got something looming early in the new year when we get the 7th carbon budget to sort of pause and refresh, because that might up the level of the game again. We probably just need to reflect on those 9 priorities and think about, does industry need to sort of take the next step in its evolution.
Well, there's a lot of focus on what we do to reduce carbon in new build, but of course the majority of infrastructure is already built. There's a lot of work that can be done about retrofit, and I think you actually talked about at the start of this year about this year being the year of commercial retrofit. Citing the net zero carbon building standard and science-based targets in the draft building guidance. Has it happened?
So I would say it's definitely started to happen. As an example, in Mace, more than 50% of our commercial portfolio now is not new build commercial offices, it is retrofit. So we are, we're revamping those buildings rather than demolishing and starting again. So that, shows me that the proof is in the pudding. It is actually happening. I think there is, things like the net zero carbon building standard have made a difference because they've given us for the first time what good looks like. So we can now put that into the planning regime. We can put that into specifications and contracts in a way that we weren't able to before. So I think with the government funding that has just come out, provided that adopts it and says, we can, our requirement is for us to be retrofitting or, creating new schools to this standard, it should start to drive the change. Certainly the investors have latched onto it in terms of discounting the investment and the interest rates on lower carbon buildings.
Right. I suppose it is in many ways very much tied into this whole issue around productivity, which you all also lead on. Clearly the Cabinet Office and IPA, the Infrastructure and Projects Authority, has been doing a lot of work leading with the Transforming Infrastructure Performance Programme. But we do hear an awful lot about technology being one path to actually transforming that productivity. And while you were at the AC, you launched the Future of Consultancy to help the sector really try and seize that opportunity. Did it succeed? Are we getting there, or are we really embracing the opportunity?
I'd say partially. So I think technically, and you would expect this from a very practical industry as we know we are, technically I am seeing us start to pick that up. So, 4D BIM, we're still, recognised globally as leaders in BIM from the UK consultancy. So we have been we're at the forefront of future standards. So I know we have the BIM mandate. There are, future iterations of that I know we're looking at, sort of leading from the UK. The area where I don't think we've cracked it yet is the commercials. And when we start to think about AI coming in, that is going to be critical.
Yeah. Well, AI is the answer, apparently. What's the question that's discussed at the Major Projects Association recently? Do you see AI really transforming the sector? Should we be worried? Should we be excited?
I think we should be excited, but we do need to actually think through the fundamental transformation that it will lead to, because it's going to happen, and those organisations that will benefit from it will be the ones that can understand what it means to them. So for the consultants, they need to shift their business model. We can't be selling people if people are being enabled by AI and you're not being rewarded for the investment in the development of the AI system. So, that is a sort of extinction path for consultants selling bums on seats, which I think we haven't quite addressed yet.
No. Well, yeah, when you look at what kind of shortcuts that AI can deliver when it comes to the entire construction process, it must be quite scary if you are sitting there in the business of providing bums on seats. So you mentioned an awful lot about investment, and we constantly hear a lot about the fact there's plenty of potential private sector investment capital queuing up to invest, but we still lack the clear strategic direction, policy consistency, etc., that's needed to breathe life into these programs. Is that fair? Do you see that changing? Do you see that there is becoming more confidence to really bring in that investment that's required?
I'm seeing the commitment to it from the government. I don't think that has yet translated because there are, when we started talking about the budget, we've sort of got the second chapter still to come when we hear in the spring. So I think actually some of the things that are going to stop this would be, we need, you quite literally need to market a portfolio of investments to investors. That's what other countries do, and we're not in the spirit of doing that. So that is something that would need to happen. The other thing is we need to get Treasury over the mental hurdle of what kind of a model is it that would work for both the public and the private sector and deliver value for money. So there have been some brilliant PFIs and there have been some terrible PFIs, and actually we need to take that learning and take Treasury on the journey to say we have learned from it, and here is how we would set it up for success in future in a way that they will buy into it and not feel that they're at risk of getting their fingers burnt again.
So do you see this government making a return to something like the last Labour government's private finance initiative as a way to really drive that investment?
I think they're going to have to consider a number of different models. There's not going to be one silver bullet, but what we need to do is to look at actually the different mechanisms. So, you've got the RAB model, we've got the learning from successful investments like Thames Tideway, and then we've got, if you look further back, the mixed success of the PFIs. And to be honest, what we need to do is to help consolidate that learning and get Treasury over the hurdle in their minds of, we have learned from it, and this is what we're going to take forward to make sure we're delivering value for money in future.
Yeah, and that means focusing on the outcomes you're getting rather than just the financing method.
Exactly, and the balance of risk and the baselines that you're setting. And there's an awful lot that you can do to de-risk it. Lots
and lots going on in your world right now, Hannah, that's for sure. I mean, given the scale and breadth of your portfolio and role, what gets you leaping out of bed each morning fired up with excitement for the new day then?
So the reason I took this role is because it's the opportunity to take all of that theory that I've worked on for the last 10 years around what is the right thing to do and put that into practice. So, we're going to be bringing to market a couple of service lines that are unique to Mace. We're going one on sort of value-based commercial strategy, which is actually implementing Project 13. So this is what a client cares about. This is what's delivered on the ground, line of sight between the two. And the second one is this construction and productivity piece, which, again, we've got the theory, but often when you get engaged as a contractor, you're so far down the line that you're too late to influence it. So bring that right up, and both of those together, I am confident, will transform the industry. And that is why I took this job. Okay,
well, sum it up for me and going right back to where we started. Huge challenges, huge opportunities, not least since the budget and the huge amount of spend which has been promised on infrastructure. Give us some free consultancy then. How do we navigate the policy shifts, the hold-ups, the planning delays, and the cost overruns to truly deliver, the infrastructure that the public and the politicians demand?
So I think in our conversations with government, we need to deploy some politics back at them. So at the moment, we need to provide evidence on the impact of some of the things that we know are not going well. So how many jobs are lost? How much is that going to cost overall, increased cost, rather than perhaps what they've budgeted? And actually, how is that going to impact on investment into the country? So those are the three things the Labour government cares about. So everything that we need to evidence back to influence this government's direction of travel should be through the lens of those three things, which fortunately are central to what we're delivering in construction.
Hannah, thank you so much for joining me today on the Infrastructure Podcast. It is exciting. It is huge opportunities out there. We know when the government is talking so passionately about the role that infrastructure can really bring to change the nation. But as you say, really challenging times, and we've got to get it right. So thanks for sharing your thoughts with us.
No, thank you very much for having me. It's been a really exciting hour.
Great stuff. Thanks, Hannah. But that's all we've got time for today. But we have more from the Infrastructure Podcast in the pipeline and more guests to talk to as we continue to probe the big issues faced across the sector. If you haven't done so already, do check out the Infrastructure Podcast website, www.infrastructure-podcast.com, where you'll find background information and all the latest podcasts to listen to and to share. So thanks for joining us. Thanks again to Hannah, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon.